Hi, and welcome to the NGINX Community Chats. During our chat, you'll get a chance to hear about some things open sourcey, meet some of the people behind open source, both inside and outside of NGINX, and maybe even learn something new. I'm Dave McAllister, open source technologist here at NGINX, and today we're getting into the bits and bytes of projects with Mike Stefaniak.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
Mike, thanks for joining us today. So
Yeah.
tell me, what do you do here at NGINX?
Right now, I'm getting into some Kubernetes stuff. Always getting into trouble in that space. We've had an Ingress controller product for a long time. That's been really great. Not the community one. Community one's great too, but there are two separate ones. Always good to know. And so we've found that the community is kind of moving towards something called the Gateway API, and so we've built an entire product around it called NGINX Gateway Fabric to address some of the problems that Ingress had. It's kind of the next generation of Ingress. So
Okay.
we're really happy about it. We just had our full commercial release a few months ago, back in August. So yeah, it's been great so far.
Yep. So you just mentioned this thing, and Kubernetes actually has been around for a while. If I remember correctly, it showed up in July 2015 when we kicked off the CNCF up in Portland, Oregon, which, by the way, was 11 years after the first release of the NGINX Core open source project. Sneak into that. But I'm familiar with the Ingress side of the house. What is this Gateway Fabric all about?
Yeah. So if you've ever used Ingress for a while, especially at a large organization, you're probably going to run into some issues. You're going to run into access control issues in terms of, let's say you've got a cluster and you've got like 10, 20, 30, 40 teams within a single cluster, and they all depend on a single Ingress. You're going to have some problems. Either you give everybody access to that Ingress, in which case everybody can inadvertently take somebody down and they make a change or make a deployment, or you give everybody else their own ingress, which then has its own problems of not being consistent, not doing things consistently, not handling traffic in the way that you want, not implementing security policies, et cetera, et cetera. And there's been some things that we've done in our Ingress project to try and address that. But then there's also problems with, everything's in annotations and nothing's standardized between products. Indeed, if you try to go from the community version of Ingress to NGINX Inc. or NGINX's official version of Ingress controller, there's a bunch of differences, even how it works, even though they use NGINX under the hood. And so the next generation of that is the Gateway API. So there's the Ingress API, which Ingress controller and Ingress implements. Kubernetes now has come out with the Gateway API that our product, NGINX Gateway Fabric, and some other, some other competitors. We think we're biased, but we think ours is the best so far. It's specifically intended to address some of those problems by basically breaking up what Ingress was doing into various levels, such as the gateway and the routes, so that the developers have everything they need to be able to deploy their applications, deploy their codes, and do constant releases without having the ability to take everybody else out, right? Without taking that central piece of infrastructure down. Just by doing that, just by breaking up the resources, there's a ton of other great things it does. Goes a long way to address the problems with Ingress.
Yeah. So, you mentioned something. Since I am an open source geek, I have credentials that actually state that someplace for this. But, we have community projects and then we have projects that are built by companies. So, in my world, for instance, we have the NGINX Open Telemetry module that was built by the NGINX team. And there's also a community Open Telemetry module for NGINX. Why did NGINX decide to build their own gateway fabric?
With Gateway Fabric, we looked at including Gateway API support within Ingress because it's very widely used today. We have a bunch of customers already that are onboarded to it. But our engineers took a look at it and they're like, look, we'd basically be building two separate code bases and then sticking them together with some glue in the middle. And what that results for our users is, well, now we have to figure out, is this available in Gateway or is this available in Ingress? We can do that with this product. You can do it with Ingress controller, but it's only in Ingress and not in Gateway. And so it'd be a really disjointed user experience, which I understand a lot of other products are out there are doing that, are adding Gateway API support to their existing products. We just believed it would be a much better user experience to build a product from the ground up with Gateway API. And then every single feature that we implement should be an extension of that Gateway API so that everything is through that central interface. There's not like, oh, well, in order to configure that, I got to make a config map off to the side here. And that does something, specific for this product. We don't want to do that. We want everything to say, you put that in your route, you put that in your gateway, you put these in the native gateway API objects that you're already used to configuring in order to configure perhaps something specific to our product. Indeed, because we have NGINX, there's a ton of different stuff that we can include there that NGINX does.
It kind of makes me wonder. So NGINX is one of the core project's major themes has been both robustness, reliability, if you will, and performance. And it sounds like some of those things are being crossed over into our version of the Gateway Fabric. Is that correct?
100%. And we do look at it like we're engineers ourselves, so we look at it from a very critical eye, and we're like, look, you could do all the things that we're doing with native NGINX yourself, and you can configure it all yourself, but it's an uphill battle to manage all of that stuff and to push updates and configure it in a Kubernetes setting, especially when you got a bunch of teams and now everybody's got to learn how NGINX works. So we essentially provide an experience layer on top of that. But what we don't want to do is then do, oh yeah, it's an experience layer, and we add a bunch of extra fluff and a bunch of cruft and a bunch of other stuff that makes performance worse or less optimized. So what we do, and our engineers are really good at being very particular on this, like, nope, this could affect performance, this could accept, we can't do this, is that we just have a control plane. And the only thing that control plane does is take your input from the gateway API, for instance, in this case. So you make a YAML that defines a gateway, and we say, okay, I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna look at this, and all I'm gonna do as the control plane is write NGINX configuration to NGINX as our data plane, and that's it. It reloads and we're good. There is no extra middleman. There's no extra thing. Literally, the only thing that we are doing is configuring NGINX. And so you will only get the overhead and performance and reliability that you expect with NGINX and nothing else on top of that. The only thing we are doing is configuring NGINX at the top of, at the end of the day, and providing a superior configuration experience. We don't have to understand all of the NGINX directives and how to configure it on top of that. You just want to say, look, I just want a rate limit for my API. Can I do that? Cool. We provide a super easy way for you to do that.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of advantages, particularly in scale, it looks like, with Gateway Fabric approach. But is it are we going to see Ingress controllers from us or from the community start fading out? Or is the Gateway Fabric replacing that?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it is sort of the successor. The community, the Kubernetes community, is kind of viewing it as the successor to Ingress. But as with any very mature product, which Ingress is at this point, there's plenty of products that implement Ingress that are very mature.
Right.
It's probably not going to go away anytime soon. I mean, if you've built a entire environment, entire cluster that supports, tens or many product teams, and you say, oh, Gateway API come out. It's better in these kind of ways. The user experience is a little bit better, but I'd have to replace all my infrastructure to do it. Is it really worth changing over? Maybe, maybe not. And so it's really up to us in NGINX Gateway Fabric to provide features beyond just kind of basic. We don't want to like, okay, Ingress did that, so we have to do that. Really what we want to do is say, what are the new things that we can do to motivate you to move over? And that's why we are Gateway Fabric instead of just a gateway controller, which is traditionally kind of north-south traffic. So you come for your client and go to your applications. We also want to pick up, we've heard this a lot, what we're calling east-west use cases, or traditionally service mesh use cases, right. Of like, look, I just want to encrypt traffic in my cluster. I just want to control the egress traffic, and that's it. I don't want any of the other stuff from service mesh. I don't want to have to deal with an extra tool. And so those are two use cases we'll be picking up pretty early next year to solve that, to basically serve as your one stop shop for traffic management within the cluster.
Well, I hadn't even considered the east-west question, but I can see that just from this brief discussion. Where traditional services meshes might start getting a little nervous as well. So Okay, so shifting gears real quickly here, you're obviously working with open source, you're working with the open source world here. What's it like working with open source projects here at NGINX?
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, it is always good. It's always a good feeling for when the work that you do goes out into the world to help make the community better, that anybody can use the stuff. And we provide, if you guys have ever used NGINX before, there's a ton of value and functionality that's out there for free. I mean, I'm using NGINX in my home server that I have, plugged into my wall over there, right? It's awesome. It's such an awesome experience. It's also great to get feedback from the community on things that we've missed, on like how terrible our onboarding experience is, which we got one of those recently. So we fixed it. Much better now. Thank you to the guy who ended up submitting that. Just always good. I mean, it's great to get feedback from the community, and it's different, right? It's a different kind of feedback, different kind of users than you traditionally do. I mean, if you guys are software developers out there, I'm sure you work with a lot of like kind of
Yeah.
business to business stuff and requirements gathering and all this stuff. It's totally different.
Mhm.
The feedback that you get through those channels.
Yeah, that's we used to consider that open source was sort of the individual approach to a business problem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hearing from the individual is very different than hearing from a collective enterprise voice, if you will. So it's kind of cool. I tend to like to talk people to people. So
Yeah, no, no, exactly. I mean, we get guys that will come in from a company and they're like, hey, I'm kind of messing around with this, kicking the tires on a little bit, which is cool. But yeah, absolutely, like hobbyists and things. Yeah, yeah, come on in, tear our code apart, throw some PRs, all good.
so this is a question that I always love to throw at my guest for this. And we've been talking about projects inside of Nginx and so forth, but there's a whole lot of open source projects. What's your favorite non F5 or Nginx open source project?
Oh man. Well, so I come
That's the standard.
from
That's the standard response. Is oh my gosh.
yeah, no, there's so much good stuff that's open source. Like so I come from a site reliability background.
Mhm.
And I used to run up an SRE team in my previous life, and so we built an entire observability kind of system for our company, all using open source tools, which was awesome. I
Nice.
think probably the most critical one. I mean, you could argue between Prometheus and this was Grafana. Without Grafana and its ability to dashboard things and dashboard them really well, because there's a lot of products that have built-in dashboarding
Yeah.
capabilities, and then you start to use them, you're like, oh, this is great. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, I can't get this. Oh, wait, no, this won't work for our environment. Oh, wait, the metrics don't render quite correctly. Just the amount of effort, and I know they've been struggling with this for a long time and have gotten a lot better at it. To be able to take that complexity and distill it down to how they have just like, hey, import a data source, do a query, and then we can render it in all these different ways. Just that, and like the access control part of it is fantastic to enable that within your organization. You can use the open source version of Grafana and go leaps and bounds within your own company in terms of the value. Like you can spin it up like that, right? There's no tools, there's no licenses, there's just spin it up, throw some data into it. You can start dashboarding stuff right away in a way that everybody can see. Not to mention, it's also really cool to use for your personal clusters at home, like for my personal Kubernetes cluster. I run like a bunch of game servers out of my Kubernetes cluster, so I get to see the status of all of them. Like, okay, yeah, CPU. Oh, that's getting kind of high. Okay, I might need to upgrade that. I might need to do something with that, without buying like, oh, I got to buy a Tableau license or like get
Nice.
some other kind of tool.
Yeah. So, getting to wrap up here, how does someone find out more about the Nginx Gateway Fabric?
Yeah, you can start depending on what you're interested in. If you're interested in the code and how we're kind of doing things under the hood, we've got developer docs and stuff on our GitHub page. You can also look at, we have all of our documentation out on nginx.org. If you just Google Nginx Gateway Fabric, you'll get our documentation there. Our documentation is also in our repository if you prefer to look at it that way, but the website view is a bit of a better experience. And you can also visit us at our community meetings, really with any topic that you have. If you just want to come by and say like, hey guys, just coming out to hang out, that's cool. We've got guys that like, hey, we want to do PRs, or it'd be really cool, I want to explain like a particular feature that we want to get in because of this use case. Yeah, come into our community meetings. We got a link on the end of our GitHub. it's a Microsoft Teams now, which, take it or leave it, but it is a great way to interface with us and talk with, because we can't get enough of the interaction, seriously. So if you want to come by and talk with us anytime.
Cool. Well, Mike, thank you for joining us today. This has been actually really informative. I've started dabbling into this Gateway Fabric stuff and the Gateway API.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
I'm in the dangerous phase of knowing enough to not know what I don't know. And this has actually been really informative and enlightening for this. So I wanted to thank you for that and sharing this project with me. And thank all of y'all for joining us today here at the NGINX Community Chat and meeting some of the people behind the power of open source. And if you've got your own thoughts and ideas, feel free to leave them in the comments. And until next time, may the open source be with you.
See y'all.